Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Soulfull Veda show. I am so excited to introduce our guest on the show today, a Vedic astrologer, Amal. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So, I want to kickstart this episode and ask you, when was the first time you felt something spiritually or felt like you were
Mhm.
connected to something bigger than yourself?
Okay, so with that, actually, it happened a lot of times, but one incident I could remember was 2017. It was the time when I started with my Sade Sati and astrologically, and it was a major transformative period for me. And I was like, a lot of things were happening in my personal life which got me into that transformative phase. And I was thinking a lot about how to get out from that. There is that moment when you don't realize that what to do at that very moment. And that was the moment when I realized that there is something much greater than this earth plane, right? So I used to preach Lord Shiva a lot, and that was the moment I realized that I have something in me which is more towards spirituality. And I went into spirituality and I started meditating. It was actually very difficult in the beginning because it was like a lot of traumas come back to you when you meditate, and there's like a lot of crying, emotions, waves of emotions, all of that. So that's how my journey began.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
were you already studying Vedic astrology at this point?
Yes, I was, because I started Vedic astrology like when I was just 16 years old.
Wow.
And this is back in 2017. I think I was 21 back then.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
when were you first introduced to Vedic astrology?
Okay, so for the very first time, I was like very small, and my mother used to get some books. There's one book you might know of. There's a red book, Lal Kitab, we call it in Hindu Sanskriti. So my mother used to get those books, and she used to read that. I was very small. I didn't have any understanding of anything. So what happened was, I used to see her doing something, making some charts, and some people her friends used to come home and they used to ask her about things, and she used to tell them things. So I have been a part of such a conversation. But then when I grew up, I saw my cousin and mother discussing over astrology number of times. And that was the point when I was introduced to astrology, and I was introduced to my mentor by my cousin, who was Kapil Raj. And then I started watching his videos, and eventually I started being interested into Vedic astrology, and I learned it for like good 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
It's such a lifetime of knowledge. Like you're just
exactly,
constantly learning and constantly evolving with
exactly.
it. When did you start to take it on as more of like a full-time thing for you and like,
Uh-huh.
okay, this is going to become my thing?
Okay, so that was, I guess, back in 2019. I completed my studies. It was actually, not completed. I didn't used to go to college because, that is the teenage. You want to be isolated. You don't want to connect to a lot of people. So I was going through that phase. And, when it's about your transformation, astrologically, when it's about your transformation period, you tend to find a lot of answers. So just in order to find a lot of answers, I was like more into Vedic astrology, though I was learning it before that also. But that was the point when I started learning it like 24 hours a day. I used to sleep for, I guess, 2 to 3 hours
Wow.
only, and I used to just learn.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love all of that. And what was the first aspect about astrology that you learned where it really just like hit you and you were like, there's something deeper here and I want to explore more?
Okay, so one thing that is, very much associated with the Vedic astrology is, like, here in India, people don't take astrology as something, like, we consider it as a pseudoscience. We consider it as a science, basically. But in India, people are more towards superstition. right? They consider astrology to be something to be scared of.
Right.
So I used to talk and discuss with a lot of people about it. And all I used to, hear was that what are the remedies? What should be done? How can we save ourselves? So nobody understood that there's much more to it. There's much more logical explanation to it. So that was the time when I understood that there is a way to change the perception of people. So that was my main focus, and that was something that used to irritate me at the first when people used to say that, because this is something my passion is, right? So when somebody says something opposite to what you are passionate about, you get agitated.
Totally.
So this was my main focus, to bring a change towards Vedic astrology.
I love that so much, and that's part of why I really connected with your
Yeah.
offerings and how you really teach Vedic
Mhm.
astrology, because I feel the same way. I feel that um, growing up more around Western astrology, I was always fascinated
Mhm.
with the stars and cosmology. And when I started to realize that, because I started in my journey with learning about Ayurveda, and then I got
Yeah.
into learning about Jyotish after. And so then I started to realize that the reason why Jyotish had been not forgotten, but not it was overlooked in Western society
Yeah.
is because it was said to be this predictive astrology. It
Yeah.
felt really constricting. It felt like really narrow minded. And then I
Yeah.
started to hear from some of my friends who grew up in an Indian family and who grew up around other Vedic astrologers, that validated their experience, and that they were told
Yeah.
things that they were doomed and gloomed almost, and that like really
Yeah.
shocked
Correct.
me and took me aback. I was grateful that I've always had a mentor who had proper lineage and um, learned from his guru and whatnot, which is really important with learning Vedic astrology. But that was so wild to me. Did you have any
Yeah.
experiences when you were younger of getting a Vedic astrology reading that felt disconnected and in that way?
Yeah, it was. I remember, although all the astrologers used to say very good things about my chart, but there was one time when there was an astrologer. I went to him and he just, made me a bit scared about everything. And that was also related to this Sade Sati period and Rahu Mahadasha. And you must have heard about Rahu. People have n number of bad things to say about Rahu. So it was just the starting period of it, and it actually came along together. My Sarasati and my Rahu Mahadasha. I'm talking about 2017, back in 2017.
Totally.
So there was an astrologer who simply told me that you are going to get ruined. You are going to have no money. You're going to be, bankrupt. You won't have any friends and all of that. And I can't tell you how bad it felt. And I was very, very demotivated at that point. But in a way, I would say that was a negative motivation for me. That made me do a lot of things that I have done till now. So,
Totally.
yeah, that was one thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I asked, because oftentimes when we go that opposite way to create that magnetism, I find that like
Yeah,
the negative polarity always shows up for us, and it makes us
exactly.
stronger and more resilient, which I love that we're going to talk about Sade Sati on the podcast today, because I know that that's like another huge misconception that when we're going through this period in our astrology chart, that, yeah, again, like we're doomed and gloom. So I would love
Yeah.
you for me first to just define what is Sade Sati and yeah, what does it mean?
Okay. So, Sarasati is actually related to the planet Saturn. Okay, and Saturn transits a particular house for 2.5 years. Actually, not a particular house, but a particular sign for 2.5 years. It is the heaviest planet, and it is the very slow moving planet. So that is why it takes a lot of time to transit through one sign, and this is like the longest of all the planets.
Mm.
So what happens is, whenever Saturn transits one house back and over the moon, and then one house uh, after the moon, that is the period which is known as Sarsati. And basically, why this period is very impactful is because Saturn, you might have heard about the mythology. Saturn has been a planet who is more towards karma, more towards reality, more towards being fair to everyone. Saturn is not the planet who is going to see if you are rich or poor. He is just going to punish you for the deeds you have done. So what happens is that during this period, all the past life karmas and all the existing life past karmas just get into that phase, and you have to face it. It's like the prarabdha karma that you can't change. You just have to face it.
Totally.
So that is what Sade Sati is.
So you mentioned 2.5 years. Is the whole time
Yeah.
period 7.5?
Yes, it's actually three houses, three signs, right?
Okay.
And 2.5 years each. So as a whole, it becomes 7.5 years.
And then when does it go over the moon? Does it happen differently for each person depending on their chart?
Yes, actually, it happens for the different people according to the houses. But actually, what is it that the first phase is going to be before moon? The second phase is actually the peak phase. We call it peak phase because it is over the moon. The
Mm.
Saturn is over the moon. And then it is the last phase is known as the declining phase. But mostly people say that the declining phase is good. What happens is that Saturn takes away everything in the first phase, then it builds up the pressure in the second phase, and then it gives you everything. But it doesn't happen like this for everyone. It depends on one person's natal chart, that how it is going to happen. It depends on the houses, because not everyone is going to have a moon in the same house.
Totally.
So
Yeah, that
that's
makes
why.
that
Yeah.
makes so much sense. And I know for our listeners they'll understand that too because Vedic astrology, that's how it is. It's so personal to your chart, and that makes sense. That's
Yes.
just how
Yeah.
Vedic wisdom is. It's the same thing with Ayurveda. You have to know your
Yeah.
constitution and your doshic imbalance. So, what is the
Okay.
significance of this time period? Why do we have to go through this?
I think the significance is that we call it like a coal is turned into a diamond in this period. So when it's the mining of coal, the workers basically hit the coal with the iron or anything, like any hard tools, and then it is turned into a diamond. So that is similar with the people also. People basically, Saturn gives very hard lessons. It makes you face the reality. It makes you go through situations where you are left totally alone, totally helpless. And they are, I think, when it's about, particularly about Sade Sati, when it's affecting the moon, there's like a lot of fluctuations of emotions. There is like waves and tides of emotions. So it makes you go through it to reach that level where you are more mature and where you are more practical about things. You know what is real life. You're not in that la la land anymore.
Totally. So, you're currently in your Sarasati, correct?
Yes, yes. I'm in the peak phase.
You're in the peak phase. So,
Yeah,
if whatever you feel comfortable sharing with our audience, but I think that
yeah,
would
sure.
like giving any specific example would be really helpful. What has been the
Uh-huh.
progression of your experience with Sadhusati?
Okay, so very honestly, I would say that my first phase was very, very difficult for me. I told you, like back in 2017, it started. I remember in November 2017, and I was totally clueless about what was happening. Like it was all fine before that, it was all going good. I had everything in my life. My life was smooth, and suddenly things started to deteriorate.
Mm.
People started to leave. I started to have different moods and different. It was like very. It was like a lot of confusions back then. So, according to me, the first phase was actually quite. It taught me a lot of things, and it led me to a better life, I would say. I had I didn't have any clue and any vision in my life. There was no goal in my life. I was just flowing. I was just. I would that will. I would say I will. I was in a la la land. But when I went through that time, I was, I got that reality check. I got that practicality, that how I should deal with things and how I should feel things actually. Because
Mm.
it's more so related to moon. Moon is your emotions, moon is your comfort. Saturn takes you out of your comforts. But
Totally.
the second phase, I would say the second phase was rather more better, because what happens is that you have already faced that heavy karma in the first. Then by this time, there's second phase, you become more used to it and you know how to deal with it. So it was better.
I love that. What
Yeah.
specific house or sign were you going through during that phase?
During the first phase,
Yes.
that was when Saturn was in Sagittarius.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean, like if someone's
Hmm.
chart when was in that specific sign?
Uh-huh. Okay, so actually, Saturn doesn't behave similar for every sign, right?
Mhm.
Because we have 12 signs and we have 9 planets, and every sign behaves differently, and every planet behaves differently in every sign. So it's not necessary that everyone is going to face, there are some fundamental. Points that everyone is going to face in Sadasati, but specifically how, when we go deeper into the analysis, then it's more about the signs. Like in Sagittarius sign, Sagittarius is the natural ninth house, and ninth house is related to higher learning. It is related to optimism. It is related to your gurus, your teachers. It is related to long distance travel, all of that. So what happens is whenever Saturn comes into the ninth house, it is also the house of luck. So Saturn delays your luck. You
Mm,
get everything. Although Sagittarius is a very optimistic sign, but Saturn is in itself is an orthodox and pessimistic sign. So it's, these are both polar energies. So they are together in a house. So it's like your optimism gets pessimistic. It comes like that. So this was one thing that happened with me a lot of times. Whenever I was all happy and hopeful about things, Saturn used to do something or the other like that, and I was forced to be pessimistic. I was forced to feel negative about things. And the other thing is that in Sagittarius, Saturn behaves quite lethargic. So I think whoever, it's not just about one person, whoever has, wherever their Sagittarius falls, the person would feel frustrated and lethargic about that particular area in their life.
mm. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. I'm curious to hear for any of your clients, what houses have they gone through in their sadasatis, and
Mhm.
like any specific examples that you can give for certain signs where you felt like there was a common theme that keeps coming up.
Yeah, so there was a client of mine, I remember, Cancer ascendant. So when Saturn was in the sign of Sagittarius, it was in the sixth house. So what happens is whenever it's in the sixth house, and you'll also see about this about Cancer ascendant people or even Cancer moon people, that these people are happy-go-lucky people. And they just, that why is that so? Because their sixth house is Sagittarius. That means that their optimistic behavior, their high spirited behavior is going to lead them into conflicts.
Mm,
Okay, so they're so all over the place. They are emotional, but their high spirited behavior, and they want all the freedom in the world, and because of that they get into conflicts. So what happened was when Saturn added was coming in the sixth house in the sign of Sagittarius, such a person went through a court case and went through major conflicts in marriage.
mm,
So because sixth house is also, it's actually 12th from the seventh house, and seventh house is the house of marriage. So sixth house denotes the conflicts of marriage, and it also represents the visas. Like whenever we file anything legal, it can be travel visas, or it can be your PR, permanent residency. Like here in India, a lot of people apply that when they are in overseas, right? So that also is represented by the sixth house. So what happens is whenever a planet transits, and especially when it's Saturn or it's Jupiter, the house gets activated. Now it depends, wherever Jupiter is placed, that is going to tell if the result is going to be positive or negative. So it's always one after another thing in the analysis. So but the main thing that is it activates is that it activates some conflict, it activates some legal cases or some legal documentations for a person. And then it comes into the seventh house. Then it is more about, it can give you a relationship, a stable relationship, a marriage. So that's how the transit of Saturn works.
Wow. So fascinating. There's so many moving pieces and other different aspects
Yeah.
to it. But it's really reassuring again and cool to see that like everyone can be so unique in their own way. So for
Yeah.
personally, my Sade Sati, I don't remember. No, it started in 2012, and then
Okay.
it just finished in 2019. I think that would mean.
Okay. So are you like Libra? Libra moon, I guess. I think so.
I'm Scorpio moon actually.
Scorpio. Yeah, Scorpio or Libra. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that must have been very intense.
It was, yeah. Scorpio moon is
Yeah.
very, yeah, it was really intense. So, yeah, it didn't start for me like right in 2012. It kind of started
Uh-huh.
probably in that second phase when it was over the moon, just because Scorpio moon
Okay.
is
Yeah,
debilitated. That makes sense.
it is debilitated. Yeah. But
Um,
I feel that Scorpio, having a Scorpio moon is much, much better than having a Taurus moon in this era, in this generation.
Yeah, I love it. And honestly, what's really interesting
Yeah.
about the Scorpio moon is my business partner, Rachel, Scorpio moon, and a lot of my
Uh-huh.
family members and a lot of my friends all have Scorpio moons too. So it's really weird how,
Uh-huh.
like, I don't know if you've noticed that
We
too.
connect. Yeah.
Yeah, you really connect with them, but I love it.
Yeah.
I feel like um, it's really used for deep transformation, and I love that feeling
Exactly.
of like getting out of the mud and going into that resiliency. Now when I'm
Exactly.
in the mud, it's not so fun.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I get that.
But I will say also, so what's interesting about mine is that my Sade Sati, and then it went straight into my Saturn return. And I found that
Okay.
my at the end of my Sade Sati, I actually felt it more than being in my Saturn return. I'm like, okay, it's difficult, but I'm not like that. I don't know. That ending streak was different for me. So that's interesting how you said
Uh-huh.
like just depending on the houses and what it goes through, it can be different
Yeah,
for everyone.
exactly.
So I would love to hear what are some of your tools that you give your clients or
Uh-huh.
that you've used in your sadhusati to help appease some of this like tense, lonely, and highly emotional energy.
So the very first thing that I suggest everyone, and I did that myself as well, was meditation. I'm telling you, spirituality and meditation actually helped me to go through that period. And one is a very common pattern that I have observed with the Sarasati is whenever it's the starting of your Sarasati, within the starting phase, a person gets into astrology. Somehow a person gets into astrology because that time becomes so confusing that a person wants to look for the answers, that why this is happening with me,
Totally.
why, right? So that why basically takes them to astrology, and that takes them to spirituality as well. So meditation, I think that is the a very good tool to get through this time, because Saturn makes your head work all the time. Even when you sleep, you'll feel that you're thinking something, there are thoughts in your mind. So with meditation, there's a clarity there, so you can have better decisions with that. And second thing which I basically did in this period was that I took myself more around animals. I don't know if that happens for everyone, but I asked that with my clients as well. And there was one client I could remember of. Again, she was Cancer ascendant. She had Jupiter, Venus in the ascendant and Pushya Nakshatra. It's like a very good placement. And she was also going through her Sadhasati. And I asked her how you're dealing with that, and she said that I have three cats and two dogs, and I'm telling you, this is my happy place. And
Oh,
same was the thing with me. My dog was my happy place all this time.
oh, I love that. Yeah, I think that really, to me, that sounds like getting closer to nature and like in whatever
Yeah,
way that is. Like animals to me are
exactly.
nature because they're just in its purest form. And
Exactly.
just, yeah, that's so interesting that you said like just getting into spirituality because that was actually my experience. I mean, I started in 2012 was the year I started yoga, and that's how I got into Vedic wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
And then that just like ripple effect into everything. And my meditation
Uh-huh.
practice started around there too, but it definitely went through a lot of phases and ups and downs before it like
Exactly.
stabilized and became a consistent practice. But I really don't know where I would be without meditation because like you
Yeah.
said, there's so much chatter and noise that happens and so many
Hmm.
conflicting things. If I didn't have a release, it would be so hard to, one, just like remain sane, but two, being able to listen to the voice of your highest self because ultimately having that come through and that strengthens your connection to source, to God, and strengthens your spirituality.
Yeah, it does. Definitely.
So I love to hear now, how does Sade Sati differ than Saturn return?
Okay, so Saturn return is basically when your Saturn comes to your natal Saturn in the transit, right? So, for example, if a person has Saturn in Capricorn, so right now, from 2020 January, they are going through their Saturn natal return, right? So, what happens is in Sarasati, the Saturn is transiting near to the moon. But in Saturn natal return, the Saturn comes over the natal Saturn only. So it affects just one house. So it is going to give the result of that particular house only. So what happens is the major result that Saturn gives with Saturn return is that it wants you to mend the house it sits in.
Mm,
Like wherever Saturn is sitting, you have to face major karma related to that house. Like for example, if your Saturn is in the fourth house, like Lord Rama had his Saturn in the fourth house, so he had to face a karma related to mother figure, and he did that. He went on 14 years, in the jungle and lived there. So that is how Saturn makes you, that Saturn plays out. So while natal return happens, this things this thing get triggers,
mm.
right? So it affects just that particular house only. The karma is related to that particular house only. But in Sarasati, it is actually all your past life karmas which come in, because that is for 2.5 years only, the natal return, and Sarasati is for 7.5 years, so the duration is also long enough. So this
Totally.
is one major difference.
So would you say, energetically, what would you say is the difference? Would you say that Sarasati is heavier and it can be more difficult and challenging?
I think yes, Sarasati is more challenging than natal return because it has number of effects. But natal return, that is just confined to one particular house and the significance of that house only.
Totally. And about Sarasati too, I wanted to ask, do we
Mhm.
can you go through multiple in a lifetime or does everyone go through multiple in a lifetime?
Yes, everyone does. Like it's not necessary that you're going to face the karma for this life. It's like your multiple lives, your past lives, all the past lives that you have. Even we don't. I told in the very first few minutes that it's the prarabdha karma that we have to face, and prarabdha karma is something that we have carried forward in this life that we can't deny because we don't know anything about it. That is in the past lives. So this is the thing.
I'd love to hear either a personal story or any of your
Uh-huh.
clients how they have gotten out of the mud of the energy of Saturn and really use that to transform and really step into their power and who they are.
Okay, so I would mention my personal story here. I used to be like a very introvert child. I used to be a child since I'm a Capricorn, so I don't like to deal with other people, a lot of people. It like frustrates me, like why are there so many people around me? So I've been very like Saturn, the sign of Saturn, Capricorn is the sign of Saturn. So it makes you feel lonely. It makes you feel more inward than going outward and being social with people. So I've been very introvert from the beginning. I've been very lonely from the beginning. But what happened in the Sarasati was that I met a lot of people, and I didn't have the confidence to speak. Right now also I'm speaking to you. Few years back, I might not have done this.
Mhm.
Like I would get that bitters, I would get that anxiety at that very point. But what it did was it built a lot of confidence in me. It built that thing in me that I know that yeah, I have that confidence, and I know how to interact with people. I don't get scared of things very easily. I don't get that anxiety very easily now. So my confidence was one thing that was triggered a lot, and it actually made me a good and confident person after that.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, that's what I not love, well, kind of. I love the
Yeah,
energy of Saturn for that reason because it's that great
yeah,
teacher within us and it pulls out that part that we need. It's not the lessons that we want, but the
exactly.
lessons that we need. And I really
Yeah,
feel that for my, um, Sade Sati and now going into my Saturn return, I went through a big phase of having to let go things like alcohol and, just a life of
yeah.
living more like unconsciously. Not that it
Hmm.
was ever like a huge problem. I feel really fortunate for that. But as I got more into my spirituality, I realized I just didn't need these certain things in my life anymore. And now that
Exactly.
I have like gotten through that phase and I'm on the other side of it, I have so much more confidence in being truthful to who I am and not needing any substances or anything like that to get in the way.
Yeah. Here I would mention one thing. I've seen one thing with water signs. Whenever Saraswati comes with the water signs, because you'll always see whenever there are heavy placements with water signs, people actually get indulged in substances because these people are so emotional that they don't know how to let out those emotions. So alcohol or substance is a way of them of letting out all the pain. So
Mm.
whenever Saraswati comes in, this is the first thing which gets affected.
Wow.
And actually what happens is it gets amplified first, and then it is, God, it gets down.
Yeah, that like nailed it. That's exactly
Yeah,
what happened. And
yeah,
it's so interesting you said that because I totally believe that that's actually been a lot of
mhm,
my past has been avoiding emotions and just not knowing how to
yeah,
process it. And I felt like
yeah,
when probably the reason why towards the end of my sadasati I started to feel all the emotions more is because I didn't have alcohol to
mhm,
suppress it. So when you don't have that
yeah,
anymore, then it was like, whoa, this is what it feels
yeah,
like to actually try to process all of
exactly.
these. It was really intense.
Yeah,
And yeah, that was like a whole thing. And now I feel so much, it's one of my gifts of like being able to
exactly.
intuitively feel others' emotions and being able to process my own emotions, which happens to be what the collective is often feeling, has been
Uh-huh.
such a strength of mine. And now I see it as such a gift. So I love Saturn energy for that. It's like turning the challenges and that mud into that beautiful blooming lotus flower.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually reminded me of Anuradha Nakshatra, because that is the significance. That's a lotus in the muddy water, and
Yeah.
that is ruled by Saturn only.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
Rachel, my founder or my partner, co-founder. That's her
Uh-huh.
moon nakshatra.
Nakshatra. Okay. I love Anuradha Nakshatra energy, to be honest.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful one. I love that too. What's your nakshatra?
Mine is Uttarashad,
Ooh,
the
what?
invincible star.
Oh, I love that.
We call it the undefeatable star. That's what I actually got into emotionally. I felt defeated all over the time, I would say, like from the very childhood. Like I was very small, I used to feel very defeated emotionally, to be honest. But now I just feel like nobody can defeat me emotionally,
Oh,
because I am strong enough you know
oh, I love that so
yeah,
much.
yeah.
So currently, what is one of your favorite parts about the chart to come back to? Like whenever you're feeling like, oh, I feel disconnected from my highest self, or I'm
Uh-huh.
feeling kind of off. What can you really anchor in? Because there's so many aspects to the chart. So what is one that like
Yeah.
really you feel connected to and you come back to?
So, whenever a person feels disappointed, um, I think everyone should go back to their Jupiter, because Jupiter is one planet which brings in that optimism, which brings in that hope. You'll always see that people who have debilitated Jupiter, they find it the hardest to believe that there is something better in the future. They'll always be in that present situation, and they'll feel pity about the present situation, that this happened, oh no, our life is doomed, all of that. So Jupiter is one planet, if that is placed very well, that actually makes you go through a lot of things. Although Mars is also associated somehow, because that is the planet for courage. But I think Jupiter is more so related to your subconscious mind, because it rules the 12th house and the ninth house. So ninth house is your higher self. It's what you believe in. And 12th house is what you subconsciously believe in. So
Mm.
I think Jupiter is, and fortunately, I have a very good Jupiter, because I have it in the ascendant, in Mool Trikona sign,
Oh,
and that is
wow.
Vargotma as well. So I think that is the strongest element in my chart. I feel, because it has all the power, whichever we call it Vargotma, call it Pushkara Navamsha, call it Mool Trikona, mine is there. It is in my chart. So that is one thing, that my Jupiter actually makes me feel very optimistic. So whenever I'm down, whenever I'm not feeling, because sometimes consultations also not do not go well. There are some people, and we being astrologers, or you being a healer, we people take on a lot of energies from other people, and those can be positive, those can be negative. So whenever it happens, I just open my chart and I look on my Jupiter. I really do that, and I just stare there and I'm
Uh,
like, it's okay, it's okay, let's understand it, let's be optimistic.
oh, I
The
love
God has given me something, you know
Oh, I love that
so
so much.
yeah.
I'm almost positive Rachel's Jupiter is in her first house as well.
Uh-huh.
And that like
Okay.
and that guides it, which is awesome. What sign
Yeah.
is your Jupiter in?
Sagittarius, Mool Trikon sign.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay,
Yeah.
amazing. I
Yeah.
love that. My Jupiter is in Leo, and I actually
Wow.
relate to that a lot.
Uh-huh.
When I 'cause-
That's like a very open, like a big hearted personality, You have a huge heart when you want to help people. You just don't look anywhere else. You just do it.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
totally feel that. And like, so in my Western chart, my sun sign was
Uh-huh.
Leo. And when I first learned my Vedic chart, and I was like, sun is not in Leo. Oh my gosh, I relate to Leo energy so much. But it
Yeah.
was so great to get that specificity because my Venus is in Leo as well. So I felt like those two
Okay.
planets both being there, that really spoke to me. And now what you just
Uh-huh.
explained so beautifully, like that resonates a lot as well.
Yeah.
I want to talk back about because you mentioned Rahu is often,
Mm-hmm.
which is referenced as the North Node, or that's
Yeah.
the best easily translation for Vedic
Mm-hmm.
astrology. But Rahu is often really misconstrued. And I'd love for you to
Exactly.
explain Rahu because even me, I just started to learn Vedic astrology, but
Mm-hmm.
very early on. I'm just in my first year. But I
Mm-hmm.
often have a hard time grasping Rahu as well. So I'd love to hear
Mm-hmm.
your perspective on Rahu and what Rahu represents.
Uh-huh. So basically, Rahu and Ketu, the mythological explanation to it is that it was one man who was cut into half, right? So Rahu is the head of that person, and the Ketu is the body. So we need to take Rahu as just the head. Just consider it to be a head, and it doesn't have the body. So it always plays with your head, first of all, because it only has that organ that is present in him. It's just the head, it is just the brain. So, first of all, what Rahu does, it makes you think a lot. Wherever Rahu is placed, you are going to be obsessive about that particular thing, but you're not going to make a lot of efforts towards that piece. Like, for example, if a person has second house Rahu, a person is going to think a lot about finances, about income, about whether I can get money from here, from there, but they won't do anything about it because Ketu is not present there. Ketu is in the eighth house. They'll research a lot of things because eighth house is about research, digging deep into things, right? So they'll research a lot of things about it, but they won't take any actions for it.
Mm.
So Rahu is that energy which just keeps you occupied in thinking a lot of things because it plays with your thoughts, with your emotions as well. Because Moon is the mind there, and Rahu, Ketu are the nodes of Moon as well. So Moon also, the placement of Moon also depends, right? The other thing is that Rahu is a since it is the face, it is the head, it wants to get everything. It's like he wants to have it, have it, have it. There's endless hunger. So if it's in the second house, if it's in the Artha houses, a person is very much career oriented. If it's in the moksha houses, which is 4, 8, and 12 houses, then a person wants all the pleasures in the world, happiness in the world. They have a lot of desires to complete, emotional desires. And if it is in the trick houses, which is 3rd and 11th, Rahu is more so about, manipulating things, manipulating, and it's more about being having a lot of communication with other people and gaining from that, gaining fulfilling their desires from that. So Rahu just wants everything. But the difference between Rahu and other planets is that Rahu can do, things which can be unethical, actually. But it's not necessary that it's completely unethical, because we look for aspects. We look for Jupiter's aspects. We look for Mars aspect. If that is there, then this Rahu is controlled. But Rahu is naturally a malefic energy. But let me tell you, it is also the Bhoga Karka. So whenever Rahu comes into the any house, like suppose Rahu is coming over the 7th house, it is going to give you relationships, because it is the Bhoga Karka. Bhoga means that that thing is going to come into your life. You are going to get this. So one thing is there, that Rahu and Jupiter Mahadasha comes like first it's Rahu Mahadasha, then it's Jupiter Mahadasha. So people say that Jupiter Mahadasha is more better because it is the most benefic planet. But I would say that Rahu is actually the most brilliant Mahadasha to have, because Rahu is going to give you everything.
Wow.
And Jupiter is not actually going to give you anything, because it is going to teach you first.
Right.
So this reminded me of one of my clients. Like he was living in Canada, right? So he just got there on with the usual process of student visa and all of that stuff. And what happened was that he became millionaire. Literally, he became millionaire with a bank job. And some other things as well, because he was very much into how to earn money and all of that. So he became very rich in the Rahu period, when Rahu period started. And then as soon as Rahu Jupiter started, because after Rahu we have Rahu Jupiter, right? So when Rahu Jupiter started, all his money went out.
Wow.
And at that point he came to me, and he asked me that should I do this. Like he wanted to go back, because he was bankrupt. He couldn't pay off any of the money, and he was like, I think I need to run.
Wow.
So this was how immediately Jupiter transformed his situation.
Wow.
So Rahu is good in certain ways.
Totally. That's a perfect example. It's really interesting because in Western astrology, a lot of times it's explained that the North Node is kind of what your purpose is in this life. And I think that's really interesting, because Rahu represents that materialism. So it's like, what can we bring in this physical realm? And I think that gets misconstrued sometimes as, what is my purpose and what am I going to be in this lifetime on this earth plane? When really in Vedic astrology, it's more just on that materialistic plane, like actually bringing physical things into this earth. And I think that, again, why it gets confused with Jupiter probably is because Jupiter is abundance, and we all think that abundance means physical objects all the time, which it totally can. That's not the totality of what real abundance is.
But I have seen Rahu, not only it's about materialism, it can even be about spirituality. Like I have seen people whenever Rahu is transiting over the 9th house, or it is transiting over the 12th house, or there's one thing in Mahadashas that we see, that is Tribhagi analysis. So in Tribhagi, we divide the Mahadasha into 3 parts, and then we analyze from that particular sign. Like for example, when Rahu comes in, then we look for all the air signs, right, for 6 years. So for it is the 18 years long period, right? So we divide it into 3 parts, and we get 3 6-year long periods, and those will be ruled first time with the Gemini, then with Libra, then with Aquarius. So these are the signs. So whenever it comes into the moksha houses from these signs, then a person is more inclined towards spirituality.
Wow.
So Rahu can also make you go through spirituality, but the one thing is that it won't make you religious. It will make you go out of the boundaries, because Rahu is the outcast. It wants to break the boundaries. It doesn't want to be confined in a place like Saturn does. Saturn is also a rebel, but Saturn has some set of rules. Saturn has an area. Like if I'm Saturn, I'm only going to be confined in this particular place only. I'm not going to go out of that. But Rahu wants to go out of that.
Mm.
So this is one thing with Rahu.
That makes so much sense. And for our listeners, can you just explain what a Mahadasha is for them?
Okay, so Mahadasha is actually a time period that is ruled by a particular planet. And that the significance of that planet and the houses that that particular planet rules, those are the theme that we are going to play out for those long years. Like here we are talking about Rahu. It is for 80, this the Mahadasha of Rahu comes for 18 long years. So wherever Rahu is placed, and I would rather say wherever Rahu Ketu are placed, because Rahu Ketu axis is the axis where you are going to go back and forth all your life. So whenever Rahu Mahadasha comes in, you are going to go back and forth in those houses, in those Rahu Ketu houses. So the effect of Rahu will be seen over those 18 years. So that is the Mahadasha.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that clarity. There's so much information here. I know so many
Yeah.
wheels are going to be spinning for our listeners, but I thank you so much for that. And I just want to ask my last question. What
Uh-huh.
aspect of the chart are you currently learning about? Because as we said, this wisdom is timeless and there's always new pieces that we're pulling from.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what part of the chart are you kind of learning more about and wanting to dive in deeper?
Okay, so that will be actually the first house and the 10th house. And why I'm saying that, because first house is actually our identity. And by talking to so many people through my work, I've realized that people do not know what their identity, what their truest self is. So the first house, digging deep into the first house, a person gets to know what they are and what they are here for. Because naturally, the first house is their soul, because sun gets exalted there. So that's your personality, that's your soul, that's what you are here to experience. And why 10th house? That I would say that is the actions that you're going to do. Mars is exalted there because Mars is your energy and Mars is your actions, right? So 10th house basically tells that how you are going to play out your personality, how you are going to play out your first house. So these are the two houses that I personally try to research on for myself and for other people as well, so that there's a clarity why we are here.
I love that. I totally agree. I think that identity and knowing the truth of who we are is so important. And I love that simplicity too, of just
Yeah,
focusing on the first house because it guides so much of the chart.
exactly.
Beautiful. Well, this was so informative. And I know our listeners are probably going to want to listen to this multiple times and save it
Yeah.
for when they are going through their Sade Sati or Saturn Return and need some of that wisdom and advice getting them through it. But I would love for you to share how our listeners can work with you and get to
Mhm.
experience more of your magic.
Okay, so I actually consider astrology more psychological than a remedial measure. So I think your users can actually work regarding knowing what's there for them and how they can deal with that
Hmm.
particular thing. Like for example, if there's a problem that can hinder their peace, or that can bring some obstacles in their life, then with astrology they can know that okay, this problem is going to reach us. Then you can have a strategic layout to that problem, that how you're going to deal with that. So I take astrology that way, and I recommend people to take astrology, take consultations for astrology just for this purpose, to so as to know that how you can deal with the things, how you can be a better person, rather than just being scared of what you are given by the god.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love your perspective on that. And what is the best way they can work with you in your offerings? Do you do full chart readings?
Yeah, I do chart readings basically on the basis of different areas. Like I have career readings separate, marriage readings separate, and I also have readings which are like there's like full analysis. Like you can ask anything about it, your spiritual progress, your about your children. Because from our chart, from one person's chart, like if I'm reading my own chart, I can not just predict about myself. I can predict about my father, my mother, my siblings, and my children as well. So that comes under full analysis. So this is the categories I deal in. So people can have consultations regarding what area of focus they have, and then they can discuss with me that over Skype call, or they can have email audio reports from me. So that's how it works.
I love that so much because, yeah, there's so many aspects of the chart that I feel like that's so great for everyone just to sort of dip their toes in or at least focus on what they want to focus on in that moment in their time in their life.
Yeah.
That's so perfect. So we'll link your website in our show notes so everyone can look at that and look at that offering. And I also recommend following Anmal and her Instagram. I love your videos. You always bring up
Hi.
different things that your clients are going through and you explain it in such a clear and detailed and specific way that just makes it so lighthearted and joyful. And I just love that psychological piece that you speak on too, because
Yeah.
it's we're meant to empower everyone. Like you have these
Yeah.
tools and knowing this information can feel so relieving. I feel relieved, even just the few things that you've shared with me, knowing about my chart a little
Yeah.
bit more. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your wisdom and your time today.
You're most welcome.
Beautiful, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.